All right, it is 2 minutes into the hour, so we're going to get started. My name is Jenny Luter, and sorry, my garage door just went off if you're hearing a lot of noise.
Sorry. My apologies.
Work from home, right? Everyone can understand. And I am the Director of Faith Partnerships at Vanco, and we are thrilled to be partners with SEEP, and we just love working with Episcopalian churches. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to let each of my colleagues introduce you, and you'll get to hear what their roles are, and they'll be sharing more about what Vanco has to offer. Abby, will you start us off?
You bet. Hey, everybody. My name is Abby, and I am on the marketing team here at Vanco, and we are so excited to be sharing with you today a little bit about driving engagement and giving during the Lenten season. So I'm going to toss things over to my colleague, Katie, and I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Abby. Yes, my name is Katie. I work closely with Abby on the marketing team, and we're thrilled to have you with us today. So thank you so much.
And I'm Keith Mundy, and I work with Jenny on the account management team. And we'll be talking with you today about engagement and relationships.
Perfect. Well, before we dive into our presentation for today, I do want to just orient us around a quick agenda. So we've gone through some welcome and introductions, and we are so excited to be on the call with you today. We're going to walk through, as we've mentioned earlier, really building engagement and relationships within your church community with Keith. And then Katie and I are going to talk to you about some tips for Lenten stewardship success. If anything that we talk about today is something that's of interest to you, we're going to give you some easy, simple next steps that you can use to implement what we're talking about today in your own church community. And then we're going to end today with our question and answer session. So I highly encourage you at any point in time during our talk today, if you have a question, want to dive into a topic more, drop that into the question box. We'll be monitoring those throughout our presentation today, and we'll be saving time at the end for those. So as I mentioned, our first featured presenter today is going to be Keith Mundy. So I'm going to turn things over to Keith, and we'll dive in with engagement and relationships.
Thank you, Abby. Whether we're talking about regular giving in a congregation, special giving, or planned giving, it's all about how we steward that relationship with a donor over a period of time. And that stewardship often involves the different ways that we can engage people in better understanding their long-term stewardship. And so one of the questions that we often ask is, if a member does not attend worship, how many days or weeks before someone contacts them? Now, I've asked this question in many congregational settings, and people begin to look at each other, and very often a congregation will realize, do we contact people? Now, I have had some congregations who said, we have a practice, if we don't see someone for 2 weeks in a row, we make a contact with them. This concept of how we relate and how we steward that relationship. And I think as someone either joins or regularly participates in the life in a congregation or a parish, this is the way they choose to affiliate and connect. And when they make that choice, I think it's important for leaders in the congregation to recognize that and to be intentional about how that relationship can be stewarded over time. The next thing that we begin to talk about is we talk about relationship, and then we talk about engagement. Engagement is about how do you track the ways that people are involved in the ministries of your congregation. Now, I don't literally mean what are they doing every day of the week, but rather just a general look at what are some of the key activities in our congregation, and how do we keep track of that within households, not necessarily by individual. And so a few years ago, I had an opportunity to work with a congregation that went through this process and found a very helpful way to look at that became very telling about how you begin to engage and how you begin to steward those relationships. So when we talk about doing that, there's some key things that we begin to look at. And The 5 areas that we began to talk about is 1, worship. Whether that's in person, whether that's virtual, or whether that's drive up, can we have an idea of which households participate in the worship life of our faith community? How do they participate in education? Maybe that's Bible study, maybe that's youth, maybe their children are in Sunday school, maybe their youth are in some kind of a youth ministry program, but is someone in their household connected to education? Service, are they involved in doing some kind of service? Maybe they're an usher, but maybe it has to do with food service. Maybe it has to do with volunteering and serving on a team or a committee in the congregation. Whatever it is that they give their time to serve in the ministry. 4th is giving. Is there what is sometimes referred to as a contribution of record? We can tell that that household, someone in that household has made a financial contribution over the last 6 months or over the last year. And then some congregations like to have the flexibility to add another kind of activity. And one that, in the congregation that I've worked with, what they use is small group ministry. That's an important part of the life in the congregation. And they'd like to see as many people as possible involved in small group ministry. And so you take this list, and then you begin to take a look at a list of your congregation. And so it might look in a format something like this, okay? And you would typically bring together some key leaders, a couple key staff people in a room, and say, we're going to go through the members in our congregation from A to Z, okay? You know A, that starts with the Adams family, you know, that family that lives on the other side of town in that old dark house with tall trees and a big wrought iron fence around it, and they always seem to dress in black. And it always causes a little bit of discomfort when Uncle Festus comes to church, because you're never quite sure what he's going to wear or what he's going to say or do. The Adams family. And then it goes all the way down to the Zinkers. That's Zynkers. And the Zinkers are the last one on the list every year. And so you go through and say, have we seen this family in worship and education and service and giving, or if that other category is? And you end up with a total of 4 or 5 possibilities. If they're in everything, they're a 5. If they're only in 4, they're a 4. And if they're in 0, they're a 0 when you get over to the far right column, which is total, okay? And so the concept here is trying to go through as many households as you can recognize. Now, it would also tell you something that if you have a group of people together, 5 or 6 people around the table, and none of them recognize a name, that might also tell you something. Maybe that household hasn't been around for a while and no one remembers who they are or how they're engaged in the congregation. But the concept is to go through the list and come up with who are these people. Now, I would also suggest you don't necessarily have to put 100% of the names on the list. We would typically say that's a starting point. But what you'll end up doing is, as you start to look down that far right column, you'll see you'll have a list of numbers from 0 to 5 in this case, if you had used all 5 columns. And the question becomes, well, what happens when we count up how many people we have in each of those groups? And so if we move to the next slide here, we begin to see a picture. And the picture goes like this. If you take those people who are 4s and 5s, most likely they are the core of the congregation. And take a look at what that number is. And then you have the 3s, the 2s, the 1s, and the 0s. And the 0s are in the last segment, and there might even some who even be outside all of these circles, okay? But the concept here is to really understand about that relationship and the way that they're engaged in the congregation. We know there are certain people for health reasons who may not be for a period of time, or somebody might get an overseas assignment. You know what those exceptions are. But generally what you're going to do is come back and take a look at how many 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. And by the way, what percentage of the households in your congregation fit into each of these 4 or 5 areas, or these 5 or 6 areas, okay? What percentage? And then you want to begin to think about, well, how did the people get to be at the center? Because I would venture most people do not start at the center. There's a journey that brings them there. And that journey is often based on their relationship within the congregation. And their relationship might be because of a particular project or particular ministry. I can think of some examples. I can think of a congregation in Chicago that puts a very strong emphasis on education. And they offer a curriculum. They have had more than a dozen courses for adults every semester. And their goal is to have 50% of their adults participate in these dozen courses. And they've got a dozen courses. And so they've got over 300 adults in their congregation. And they're trying to get 150 of them to participate. Right? And it's because education is important. The congregation that I particularly belong to is one that has a great music program. And their focus is on music. And there are 11 choirs in this congregation. And they reach out anywhere from kids starting at the age of 7 all the way up to people who are in their 70s. From 7 to 70, there's a choir, there's a quartet, there's a handbell choir, there's an orchestra, there's all kinds of music opportunities. Right? But these become ways that people connect and relate to the congregation. And the key is beginning to see what are the different ways that people move toward the core. And one of the ways to learn that is to talk to people who are in the core and say, how did you get this engaged? How did you get this involved? What brought you when you came here? You might have been a 1 or a 2, and now you're a 4. What helped you to get there? And then you can say, how can we as leaders, those of us who are in 3 and 4, accompany those who are 1s and 2s to move toward the core or to move toward the center? So this is the concept. It's been something that I've shared with a lot of congregations, and people have really liked this idea. Someone might ask the question, well, exactly how does this work? Give an example. So I think of a congregation that I worked with, and they went through and prepared this chart, and they had 135 households that were 0. 135 households that were 0. And what they did was they asked for some volunteers to go visit these 135 households. So over a 4-month period of time, they went out and made 135 visits. When they got done with that, they noticed some things. First of all, they noticed their average worship attendance went up by more than 100 per week. Average worship attendance went up by more than 100. Why? Because there were more than 100 households who began coming back to worship after the visit. Secondly, they found out there were over 40 households, just over 40, who were going to another church. They decided this wasn't the church that was for them. They didn't want to attend there regularly. And so they simply asked, would you like to be taken off our list? So it was a way to kind of update that and find out where people are at. And then there were a third of people in the congregation who had other issues. Okay, I don't know what all of those were. Some might have been they didn't like the way the pastor parted his hair or whatever it might have been, but there were some issues there. But the point was they were able to take 135 households that were on the outer rings in this congregation and to bring that a group of those people back and to learn which ones had gone somewhere else. They could then better and more effectively steward that relationship and engage with those people to try to help them grow towards the core. That's the concept I'd like to introduce to you today.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Keith, for those great points on building engagement and stewardship relationships. So as we transition over to Katie and myself, we're going to talk a little bit about some tips for Lenten stewardship success. I'd really encourage you, if you have questions about engagement or building relationships, drop those in the question box. Katie and I are going to be touching on here a little bit later a few tools that can help you with reaching out, especially in our now virtual world, for engagement and relationships. But we want to make sure we're touching on those things that are top of mind for our listeners today. So as I mentioned, Katie and I have spent many years working with our churches, helping them prepare for their upcoming Lenten season. So we're going to share with you all today our 3-step process for getting ready for the Lenten season, Easter, as well as the Easter season after the holiday. And we're going to talk through these things. And then, like I mentioned, we'll show you some free tools we have at the end to help you, regardless of where you're at along this journey. So I'm going to start with step 1, which is planning. So we really encourage you, as you get ready for the holiday season, to take a minute and build your calendar. Now, we know that the Lenten season is very busy between different holidays like Ash Wednesday and the events your church might be hosting virtually or in person this year, as well as any of those special funds or goals that your church might have over the next handful of weeks. Take a minute and jot all those down onto your calendar. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to build your Easter communication plan. And whether you're a part of assisting with building this plan or just want to make sure that any of your goals are acknowledged and shared out, this is going to really help you as you are really centering around what are those messages and goals that you want to be sharing out with your members. Next, we touched on this already a little bit, but make sure you are setting goals for your church so you can stay on track. And these goals can be a variety of different things. They can touch on things that Keith mentioned earlier. Maybe it's making a certain number of touch points or connections with your members. Maybe it's increasing engagement in your small group by X%, or they can be related to financial goals. So maybe you're hoping to raise X amount of money for your local food drive. Figure out what those goals are, how you're going to communicate those out, and then who's going to be responsible for helping you drive success towards those. And then lastly, and this is something Katie and I have quite a bit of experience with, make sure you don't just say it once. We really encourage you to use different methods of communication and to share that message out multiple times to make sure that it reaches all of the members or guests that are in your congregation. So I'm going to turn things over to Katie, and she's going to touch a little bit more on communication and spreading the word.
Great. Thanks so much, Abby. I love talking about step 2, spreading the word, because I think churches come with so many ideas. In my years at Vanco, I've heard so many great ideas that I love to share with you now. So the first one being, explain how you will use Easter donations from your members and visitors. And this can be done in a variety of ways. A lot of churches, of course, choose to explain how their donations are used from the pulpit. I've seen a lot of churches put it in their e-newsletter. Another way that we're very accustomed to in the past year is in those online virtual services. You name it, there's many different ways that you can explain to your members how those donations are being used. Just make sure to do it in a consistent manner. Also, take time to talk about your church's Lenten and Easter plans. My church here in Minneapolis, I love that they send a postcard ahead of the Lenten season explaining all the different events coming up. I can add those to my calendar. I can see the different activities, whether that's Ash Wednesday service, whether that's the drive-in fish fry, many different ways that they've been able to connect with their congregation using a postcard. But of course, this can be done on your Facebook page, again, on your newsletter. You choose what best works for your church. And share a story of success. I think this combines well with point number 1. You can share those stories and incorporate them into your sermons from the pulpit. You can put together little stories and include those in a section of your newsletter, but make sure you're sharing those stories, because I'm sure your congregation will be able to connect with those nicely. And lastly, end with a call to action. And these calls to action can really vary. They can relate to time, talent, and treasure, but make sure you're inviting them back. And speaking of Lent and the Easter season, we're excited to present to you today Vanco's Easter Giving Kit. This is full of a variety of marketing materials and promotion materials to help you get the word out about your plans for the Lenten and Easter season. So we have a really great website. As soon as I'm done speaking, I will put that into the chat so you can locate it. Don't feel like you have to look at it right away. You can always bookmark it and come back to it. But this is a great way to connect back to those points I just shared with you on spreading the word.
Excellent. Thanks, Katie. And as I'm transitioning into step 3, I want to give a reminder. We know that there are some listeners on our call today that are currently using Vanco and some that are not. These materials within the Easter Giving Kit can be customized regardless of what you're using for giving or stewardship during the holiday season. So I really encourage you, regardless of where you're at on that journey, if you utilize somebody for e-giving, if you utilize Vanco, or you're still just considering e-giving, there are some great tips in here that will go beyond what Katie and I talk about today to help you with increasing giving and communicating your message out. So that does bring us to step 3, which is make giving easy. So we know that historically, Easter is one of the most highly attended days of the church year. And it was right around this time last year that we were starting to really go into changes as our world shifted from virtual or from in-person services to virtual. And we're going to see that trend continue most likely during this Easter season. So making giving and engagement easy is more important this year than it has been in the past. A couple of the things that I'm going to touch on here, and again, this is where I really encourage you to be thinking about your members who are attending your Easter season, as well as your visitors, is the use of paper check has dropped 50% in the last 15 years. So as you're looking at your members who are logging on and joining you virtually, what options do they have in order to express their generosity in the same way that they're engaging in your ministries? With Vanco, we see that setting up online giving can lead to an average increase in 26% of total giving across the calendar year. So again, I really encourage you, take a minute to evaluate how you're asking your members and your guests to engage with you and see if your opportunities for them to express their generosity align with that. And speaking of generosity, our last tip is always to express gratitude, whether that's before, during, or after the offering. Katie's earlier mention of sharing success stories is a great way to do that. So tying your success or the actions that their funds have had back to an impact or a personal story can really thank that member and then encourage them to see the potential that they can engage with as they move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she's going to talk a little bit about, as we think about our Easter season, what are some ways to get outside the box?
Exactly. I think getting outside of the box is a perfect way to state it, Abby. So often when we think about Lent or Easter, we're thinking about just those contributions, whether it's those Sunday contributions, those Ash Wednesday contributions, Palm Sunday, Easter, but there are so many different activities in between that time that you can consider using e-giving and payment options to make giving easier for your congregation. So whether that be Easter lilies, I know a lot of churches offer their congregation the ability to purchase Easter lilies using a donation. A lot of churches have registrations for Easter egg hunts. That's a fun one, or many different special collections throughout the season. Virtual services has been a unique one too. I know I mentioned my church here in the last slide, but my church makes a really nice way for when you tune in for virtual services. Right underneath that screen, there's a way for you to click on a button to give, and we'll expand on that further, but that's a unique way for members to still be able to give even though they can't physically be there in the passing of the basket. There's also a variety of different spring events. This really varies, but consider collecting donations, payments, or registrations for spring events rather than having to run around and track down those paper forms, the check, and the cash. And lastly, drive-through fish fries. My church has an amazing fish fry every year, and just last year they had to switch it to a drive-through. They still had great participation, and it made it easy for members just to come in and swipe a card rather than having to bring along that cash that they may have forgotten at home.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Katie. So now that we've had an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about some key tips that you can utilize in order to drive engagement as well as stewardship during the Lenten season, we want to take just a few minutes before we head into our question session to talk about some free tools that we have here at Vanco that can help you as you're looking to build that engagement, as well as some tools that we have to help you with supporting generosity if you are gathering remotely. So I'm really excited to be sharing with all of you today our new Vanco Face Suite. So again, if you are a current Vanco client and some of this looks different from what you have today, we'll talk about at the end how we can help you with making that transition over to our new technology. But again, we're really going to focus on making your church the center of this story and really sharing the great work that you do while inspiring generosity along the way. So I want to start our conversation today by touching on Vanco Mobile. And this is a free engagement app that we released earlier this year. And the idea behind Vanco Mobile is to give you a simple way to both build those relationships as well as engagement, regardless of where your members are gathering, so whether that's in person or virtual, giving you those simple ways to connect together. And I want to give a shout out. We've had a couple of questions come in so far, which I think is great. And I'm going to touch on a few ways that we can help with these questions so far right within our Vanco mobile platform. So one of the key ways we really encourage you to dip your toes into a church app, especially as we go into the Easter season, is by thinking about your events. So as I mentioned, we're navigating through a new world where with our events, they may be solely virtual. They could be a combination of virtual or in person. And those in-person events may include attendance limits. So I'm going to touch on here in just a little bit how you can utilize Vanco Mobile to create and share out events that your church is doing with your members. With these, you can set attendance limits if it's applicable. You can allow your members and visitors to RSVP, whether that's through the app or online. And you can create as many events as it makes sense to you and easily share these, whether it's on your website, in emails, or on social media. So as I'm getting my phone pulled up here, I want to give a few commentary here. So many of you asked some tips for taking attendance, if that's something where you are starting to come back together in person, and so you can build that engagement matrix like Keith mentioned. And Vanco Mobile is a great way that you can start to take a look at attendance outside of actually physically taking attendance at service. So you guys should all be able to see my phone now. Mr. Bear should be hanging out in his life jacket. And we're going to get started with our Vanco mobile app. So I'm going to just touch on the upper right-hand corner and hop right in. So I want to start with our events because that's where we picked our conversation off, and we've had some questions come in so far. So if I click on my calendar tab down here at the bottom, you can see that there's a number of different events that we have already scheduled within our calendar. We've got Ash Wednesday coming up on the 17th, and I can easily, as a member, make the determination to RSVP for an event, add it to my calendar, as well as confirm additional attendees. So again, an easy way to see as I'm looking through that engagement chart, Thompson family has been attending worship, and I can add those points into that specific event. The other thing that we're able to do, again, thinking back to some of the information that Keith shared with us earlier, is I can also take a look into some upcoming events that may fall into different categories. So as I've scrolled down here, we can see looking forward into the future, we've got a mission trip scheduled for July, and that may be us just getting out into our community and helping with some local missions that we have, as well as our food shelf event. So again, I can choose as a member to RSVP for those events that are things that interest me. And again, as the church, I'm able to easily see where my members are engaging in order to draw those connections to the things that are top of mind for them. The other item that I want to touch on here just briefly is as it relates to sort of transitioning into that pandemic. So how do we continue to encourage engagement in things like services, ministries, and education, even though we're not able to gather in person? And that's a great place where our groups and chat function comes in. So within Vanco Mobile, you're able to give your members a platform where they can create small groups for things such as youth ministry, for Bible study, for church staff meetings, such as your finance committee. And it really gives you an opportunity to give people a virtual space that they can connect within. So a few that I'll just hop into here is our finance committee is an easy place for us to share information back and forth, coordinate upcoming meetings. We can share out our Zoom meeting links or however we're looking to gather together, as well as coordinate those with events. So we all have them on our schedule, and there's no reason that we should forget that we have a finance committee this Wednesday. A few other ways that you can utilize this is for some of those smaller groups. So maybe you have a core group that's very engaged in your food shelf, whether it's volunteering, supporting it, or just wanting to be able to share those success stories. Again, this is a great way for you to allow a group leader to take an initiative into sharing that information out and allow others within your congregation to really celebrate in that success and share their excitement out with them. And then lastly, because this is one of my personal favorites that Keith shared, is that idea of when your members aren't able to attend service or they haven't attended an event for so long, how are you able to reach out to them? And Vanco Mobile can be a great place for you to open up and extend those conversations. So we're going to use Teresa as an example, and Teresa's, we're going to pretend that she's a member at our church, and Teresa didn't make it to service for the past couple Sundays, and I'm able to send Teresa a message through the Vanco Mobile app. Again, it goes personally to her and gives her an easy platform where she's able to reach back out to me, giving her the opportunity to let me know that she's okay, or if there's something that we can do to help her. Maybe she doesn't know we're offering virtual service or has had some trouble connecting. We can make sure that any of those challenges that she's working through, we have an opportunity to address right within our Vanco Mobile app. So again, I don't want to spend a ton of time here, and I know we just scratched the surface, but a few key ways that you can utilize Vanco Mobile as a way to really strengthen that engagement and drive forward to building those relationships within your own church's app. So I want to, again, I'm going to transition things over to Katie, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to let Katie talk through some of those tools that do relate to tips for driving stewardship during the Lenten season. And Katie's going to touch on a few ways that we can assist from there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Abby. And I'm really excited to show you Vanco Valley Community Church. So this is a demo teaching site that Vanco easily built using a simple online website builder. And there's a couple different areas I want to take time to point out to you. And feel free at any time to go to vancovalleychurch.com and offer some really great tips if you're in the process of building a website or if you're looking to improve on your website. So we want to look at how members express generosity. Let's look up here at the top. Express generosity, stay in touch with communications, and see both in-person and virtual events. So I want to take a minute now to look at events here. Give it a minute to load. Like I said, on each page, we offer some tidbits and information on why, for example, on this page, an events page is recommended along with some best practices. So if we look here, we have a couple different events. We have food shelf volunteer shift, we have Bible study, and we also have online Sunday service. So let's take a look at the food shelf volunteer shift. So Abby demonstrated for you Vanco Mobile. This is how you can access Vanco Mobile from your website, rather than, for example, if churches don't want, members don't want to use their phone, they can always just go directly to the church website as well. So what I like about this is that you can share a description of that event. You can share your story, you can share that impact. So spreading the word, it connects back to step 2 that I shared with you earlier. So that can be done right here. Another benefit of connecting this with your website is it allows you to cap attendance if you wish. So we all know that we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and a lot of churches had to scale back some of their events. So this allows you, for example, with the food shelf, to keep it at 15 seats. So you simply enter your name, total number of attendees, your email address, and your phone number. And it's just that easy to save your seat for the food shelf volunteer shift. So we head back to the main page. So as we move into the Lenten and Easter season, I encourage you to consider a Give Now button if you don't already have one. But if you do have one, take along with us as I share this with you, as you may learn some great tips to improve on your current giving page. So we have Give Now right here. If I was to click on that, and I already have it pulled up on my computer, it'd bring you to Vanco Online. And at Vanco, we recently released a new online giving page. Same security as our previous pages. We just have a really awesome new and improved look that really allows you to connect with your members and share stories and images. So we'll see here, we have a variety of different giving categories. At Vanco, we call these tiles. So we have Sunday offering. If you think back to those giving opportunities I shared on that pinwheel, we had Easter lilies. We also have food shelf donations, virtual Easter egg hunt, community projects, weddings, and facility rentals. So I hope as I walk through this today, it kind of jogs your mind of all the different ways you could potentially collect donations, payments, or registrations. So let's take a look at Sunday offering. We're going to make a donation here. Like I showed you with the food shelf, this allows you to share a really nice description of that fund or tile, and then members can simply set up their one-time or recurring contribution. So let's make this a $75 gift. I'm going to have it the frequency be monthly. I'll have the start date be on Thursday, and I can add it to my basket. And you'll see here in the upper right-hand corner that it calculates for me. Before I continue to payment, I can always look here on the left and contribute to more ways to give. So I could always add in an Easter lilies gift or make a donation to the food shelf. I'm going to continue to payment now. And since I'm already logged in, it's going to remember my credit or debit card information. So it has my Visa in here. I could always use a new card, or I can connect it to my bank account, whether that's a savings account or a checking account. Now, if we look here on the right-hand side, this is one of my favorite features of our Vanco Online page. It allows members to contribute 3% to extra to help cover the processing fee. So you'll see that my gift changed from $75 to $77.25. There's a benefit here for both members and the church staff. Church staff allows them the opportunity to give members the way to contribute using their credit or debit card, and members appreciate this option because they love that convenience. And so you can choose that percentage. I typically see churches choose anywhere between 1% or 3%, but it's up to your church staff to decide. I can continue to review. You'll see here my confirmation to submit. So it's really just that easy for members to come to your website, click the Give Now button, and choose from a variety of giving funds, or what we call Vanco tiles, whether that be a donation, or whether it be a payment or a registration. The possibilities are really endless. So one common question I get before I wrap up here is, this looks really great for our members, but what does this look like for our church staff? So I'm going to hop over to the back end system here at Vanco. Give me a minute to log in. I was already logged in, but it logged me out for time. All right. So you'll see here all the different tiles I have available that are member facing for Vanco Online. What I like about this is rather than you having to delete funds after each season of the church, you can simply archive them. So rather than deleting Easter lilies, for example, I can save it until next year and hide it. This way you don't have to come back year after year and recreate the tile and go through that work. You can just simply save it. This goes, I know, for a lot of churches who made a variety of different Christmas related tiles. That, again, as we head into the Easter season, they simply archived it and saved it rather than having to go back later this year to recreate them. So let's click on new tile. I'll simply show you here really quick how you can create a new tile. So you're prompted with a question. What type of tile would you like to create? Is it a gift related tile or is it a payment related tile? And it provides some examples here for you. Let's move forward with a gift. I could name it, let's say we're going to do a fish fry. We can save and continue. I can add in those details, that story about the fish fry and perhaps how the proceeds from the fish fry help the church fund a variety of activities throughout the year. I can add an image. You could add an image from the library we offer, or you could upload, for example, an image from last year's fish fry. You can then connect it to whichever bank account you wish, and then you review it before making it live on your Vanco Online page. So if we head back here, this is where you also can look at the back end of Vanco Mobile. I won't hop in here for the sake of time, but Abby, like you saw, demonstrated Vanco Mobile. So this is how you can really control the back end of Vanco Mobile. So I've showed you the front end that's member facing. I've shown you the back end where your church staff can easily log in at any time to manage your Vanco Online and Vanco Mobile pages.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie, for walking through that. I'll just have you shut your screen share down and then we'll talk a little bit about next steps here. So again, really want to thank you all for giving us an opportunity to talk to you about, like we've said, some tools that can help you as you're looking to tell your story and inspire generosity with Vanco Faith. We've had some great questions come in so far, but before we get into that, we want to answer one of our most commonly asked questions, which is, this looks great, what happens next? Well, regardless of if you're a current Vanco client or you're new to thinking about doing online giving with Vanco, we always encourage you to start with our personalized demonstration or our e-giving page consultation. That's going to help us to learn a little bit more about your church, your goals, and your missions. And then from there, we can help you select, set up, and really create that path to getting those right tools for your church. After we've got that plan in place, we're going to partner you with our implementation team and our client services team, and they're going to help make sure that everything gets set up and answer any questions that you may have. We'll pair that with our marketing materials, similar to what you saw with the Easter Giving Kit. And from there, you're ready to start driving engagement as well as increasing engagement. So I highly encourage you, if you are interested in getting started with a personalized demonstration or an e-giving page consultation, drop your name in the chat and we'll make sure that we have a chance to follow up with you to learn a little bit more about that. But I do want to make sure we get an opportunity to address. We've had some great questions come in through the chat box and the question box so far. So we'll take a minute to address those that are in there already. But if you have a question and you haven't had a chance to ask it yet, highly encourage you to do so now. Awesome. Well, I will get started with our first question here. And then Katie, I've got one I'm going to toss to you here as a fast follow. So one of the great questions we got submitted today is thinking back to our Vanco mobile app. And one of you asked, we have a number of volunteers in our outreach program who are not a part of our parish. Would we be able to set them up to use this app even though they are not members? Great question. Yes, with Vanco Mobile, you can have as many individuals within the app as you'd like. So whether they are just volunteers or they're members, maybe they are guests that are evaluating your church, you're able to add whoever you'd like to your Vanco Mobile app, and then they're able to engage in those events or those groups that make the most sense for them. All right, Katie, I'm gonna tap into your vast experience with this next one. Any advice for encouraging platform sign up for congregations largely consisting of older folks or folks who are reluctant to use technology to this degree?
Sure, let me share a couple ideas, then I can open up to Abby or Keith if they have other ideas as well. So one I've seen churches do, and you may find this, you'll likely find this in our Easter giving kit, but providing step-by-step instructions. It can be intimidating to tell, your seniors to go to the church website and just locate that giving button and set up their gift. But if you include step-by-step instructions and make it easy, they'll get the hang of it likely. Similarly, I've seen a lot of churches, and I know this can be challenging during a pandemic, but they've, after services, they've included, they've had tables set up where seniors or anyone who, really struggles with making an online contribution can come, someone can be next to them and walk them through that process, make that first initial gift. Maybe it's just that one-time gift. And once they're comfortable with that small one-time gift, they'll likely come back to set up a recurring contribution. So make that ask small, get them comfortable. Perhaps, like I said, maybe it's just a $10 one-time gift, but as they get their feet wet, they feel more comfortable, they can go back to the comfort of their home and make perhaps a larger recurring gift.
Excellent, great idea this there, Katie. One more I'll add, and then it looks like Keith might have an idea as well, is identify if there are a few champions within your congregation that you can tap. Maybe somebody in that demographic that's willing to give it a try or has really adopted it. I know previously, before COVID, we saw that snowbirds were some of our biggest adopters because they were able to enjoy their winters somewhere that was warm, but still continue to give to their church. So by finding an advocate who's more similar to them, they may feel a little bit more comfortable asking those questions or following their example to get on board with that first gift, like Katie said.
I recall one congregation that I encountered who looked for a youth volunteer to be the person who would be at the laptop in the narthex each week to help anyone who wanted to make an online gift so they'd be more comfortable doing that. And it was a way to engage the youth and to have them also show hospitality towards visitors.
Excellent. That's a great example there. And I know Jenny also shared out in the chat our resource center. So as you're thinking about those step-by-steps, we also have some great how-to videos to really help with breaking those individual steps down to make it feel more approachable to your members. Excellent. And I also want to, as we're just taking a minute here to see if any more questions come in, I want to give a thank you to those of you who've been dropping ideas into the chat for how you're tracking attendance and engagement today. It's always great to hear from your peers about some ways that they're doing things. So a big thank you to all of you for keeping the conversation active in the chats as well. Excellent. Well, I think that starts to transition into the end of what we have for everyone today in terms of engagement and stewardship tips. But again, if you're interested in finding out more or just want to chat, we're always here to help, whether it's with questions or talking about resources and tools. I'll leave our contact information up on the screen here. But again, don't hesitate to reach out, whether it's via phone, through our website, or still through chat. We'd love to make sure that we get a chance to address any questions that may be top of mind to you. Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to say a big thank you on behalf of all of us here at Vanco, and we look forward to helping support your church and any questions that you may have related to engagement in stewardship.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today.